Trevor and Marcus Johnson were not just brothers. They were best friends. Born minutes apart, the identical twins had always been inseparable. Their bond was unbreakable, forged through years of shared laughter, tears, and countless adventures. Growing up in a small neighborhood where everyone knew each other, the boys felt safe and loved. Their mother, Ms. Johnson, worked tirelessly as a nurse to provide for her family. Though money was tight, she made sure her sons never lacked anything important, especially love and encouragement. The twins were special in many ways. They had deep brown skin that seemed to glow under the sun, matching grins that could light up even the gloomiest days, and a natural curiosity about the world around them. From an early age, Trevor and Marcus stood out, not because they wanted attention, but because they were genuinely unique. Whether it was building elaborate forts out of blankets or creating imaginary worlds during playtime, their creativity knew no bounds. But what truly set them apart was their passion for martial arts. Their father, Mr. Johnson, had introduced them to Taekwondo when they were barely toddlers. A former black belt champion, he believed martial arts taught discipline, respect, and self-control, qualities he wanted his sons to embody. Every evening after work, he would take the boys to their tiny basement dojo, which was more like a cluttered storage space with a worn-out mat. There, amid stacks of boxes and old furniture, he trained them patiently, teaching them how to punch, kick, block, and focus. Martial arts became more than just a hobby for Trevor and Marcus. It was a way to connect with their dad and honor his dreams for them. But life took a heartbreaking turn when the twins were 8 years old. Their father passed away unexpectedly due to a sudden illness. The loss left a void in their lives that nothing could fill. For weeks, Trevor and Marcus refused to step foot into the basement dojo. It felt too painful to be reminded of him. However, one evening, their mother gently encouraged them to go down there together. She told them, "Your father gave you this gift because he believed in you. Don't let his lessons fade." With trembling hands, the boys opened the door to the dojo and stepped inside. At first, it was hard. They couldn't help but cry as memories flooded back. But slowly, they began practicing again. Each kick, each punch, brought them closer to feeling their father's presence once more. Over time, the basement dojo became a sanctuary, a place where they could channel their emotions and keep their father's spirit alive. By the time they turned 12, Trevor and Marcus had earned their junior black belts, a testament to their dedication and hard work. Despite their achievements, the twins rarely talked about their martial arts skills outside their home. They didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to themselves, especially since they already stood out in other ways. Being African American in a predominantly white neighborhood meant they often faced questions and stares, though most people were kind. Still, they learned early on to stay humble and avoid showing off. This humility shaped who they were: quiet, thoughtful, and observant. When Ms. Johnson received news that Trevor and Marcus had been awarded scholarships to attend St. Augustine's Academy, she was overjoyed. St. Augustine's was one of the most prestigious private schools in the city, known for producing future leaders, innovators, and changemakers. The scholarship was a golden opportunity, one that could open doors to brighter futures for her sons. But as thrilled as she was, she couldn't ignore the weight of the decision. Sending her boys to such an elite institution meant stepping into unfamiliar territory. Would they fit in? Would they thrive? For Trevor and Marcus, the idea of attending St. Augustine's was both exciting and nerve-wracking. On one hand, they were eager to explore new opportunities and meet different kinds of people. On the other hand, they worried about leaving behind the comfort of their neighborhood and starting fresh in an environment where they might not belong. The thought of wearing uniforms and walking through grand hallways filled with students from wealthy families made them feel uneasy. What if they stuck out like sore thumbs? What if they weren't good enough? As the summer before school began drew to a close, Ms. Johnson did everything she could to prepare her sons. She bought them second-hand uniforms from a thrift store, stitched their names neatly onto the collars, and reminded them daily to hold their heads high. "You are smart, talented, and strong," she told them. "Don't ever forget that." Her words gave Trevor and Marcus the confidence boost they needed. even if doubt lingered in the corners of their minds. Finally, the big day arrived. Dressed in their slightly oversized uniforms, Trevor and Marcus boarded the bus that would take them to St. Augustine's. As they approached the campus, their eyes widened in awe. The sprawling grounds looked like something out of a movie, with manicured lawns, towering trees, and majestic brick buildings. Students milled about, chatting animatedly while carrying designer backpacks and sipping coffee from expensive cups. Everything seemed so polished, so perfect, and so far removed from the world they knew. The twins exchanged nervous glances as they stepped off the bus. Their hearts pounded as they walked toward the main entrance, clutching their schedules tightly. They tried to blend in, keeping their heads down and avoiding eye contact. But it was impossible not to notice the curious stares and hushed whispers following them wherever they went. Some students openly pointed at their uniforms, commenting on how different they looked compared to everyone else. Others snickered, quietly, making snide remarks about their sneakers, which were clearly not the latest brand. By lunchtime, Trevor and Marcus had already decided they hated the cafeteria. It wasn't the food, it was the atmosphere. Sitting alone at a corner table, they picked at their sandwiches while listening to snippets of conversations around them. One group of girls giggled loudly about their summer vacations in Europe, while another boy bragged about his new gaming console. None of these things sounded familiar to the twins. Back home, summers meant playing outside until dark, and entertainment came from books borrowed from the library or movies rented on weekends. As they ate, a shadow loomed over their table. Looking up, they saw 3 older boys standing there, smirking. The tallest one, with slicked back hair and an air of arrogance, introduced himself as Chadwick Harrington III, or Chad, as he preferred to be called. His friends flanked him like bodyguards, sneering down at the twins. "So you're the new scholarship kids, huh?" Chad said mockingly. "What do you think you're doing here? This isn't your kind of place." Trevor clenched his fists under the table, anger bubbling inside him. But Marcus placed a calming hand on his arm, silently urging him to stay composed. Ignoring Chad's taunts, they finished their meal quickly and retreated to the safety of an empty classroom. Once, alone, Trevor slammed his fist against the wall in frustration. "Why does he have to be such a jerk?" he muttered. Marcus sighed, his voice soft but steady. "We knew it wouldn't be easy. Let's just focus on getting through today, okay?" Little did they know, this was only the beginning of their journey at St. Augustine's. The challenges ahead would test their strength, resilience, and courage in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But deep down, buried beneath layers of fear and uncertainty, lay a spark of determination, a promise to themselves that they wouldn't let anyone break their spirit. The bullying at St. Augustine's Academy didn't start immediately, but it didn't take long either. By the end of their first week, Trevor and Marcus had already become targets for Chadwick Harrington III and his group of friends. Chad, as he liked to be called, was the self-proclaimed leader of the school, a tall, broad-shouldered boy with a sharp jawline and an even sharper tongue. He came from a wealthy family that donated generously to the school, which gave him a sense of entitlement. His 2 closest followers, Ethan and Ryan, were always by his side, laughing at his jokes and backing him up whenever trouble arose. Chad's favorite pastime seemed to be making others feel small, whether it was mocking someone's clothes, teasing them about their grades, or simply ignoring their existence altogether. He thrived on power. And when he noticed Trevor and Marcus sitting quietly in class, keeping to themselves, he saw an opportunity. To Chad, the twins were easy targets, new students, scholarship kids, and different from everyone else in ways that stood out like flashing neon signs. It started subtly, just little things designed to unsettle them. During math class, Chad would lean over and whisper insults under his breath, calling them names like charity cases or lost causes. In the hallways, Ethan and Ryan would accidentally bump into them, knocking books out of their hands and smirking as they walked away. At lunch, Chad made sure to sit near enough to comment loudly about how pathetic their lunches looked compared to his gourmet sandwiches brought in from a fancy deli downtown. At first, Trevor and Marcus tried to brush it off. They told themselves it wasn't worth getting upset over. They'd dealt with worse before, hadn't they? But the constant jabs wore them down. Every snicker, every roll of the eyes, every muttered insult chipped away at their confidence. The worst part was knowing there was nothing they could do without risking further ridicule or punishment. After all, Chad and his crew were popular, and popularity meant protection. Teachers rarely questioned their behavior, assuming they were just being playful or harmless. One afternoon during gym class, the bullying escalated. While the rest of the students gathered around to play basketball, Chad singled out Trevor and Marcus, ordering them to join his team. When they hesitated, unsure if this was another one of his tricks, he sneered. "What's wrong? Scared you'll embarrass yourselves?" he taunted. Reluctantly, the twins stepped onto the court, only to find themselves completely ignored by their own teammates. Every time Trevor passed the ball, Chad intercepted it. Every shot Marcus attempted was blocked by Ryan, who laughed cruelly each time. By the end of the game, the score was embarrassingly lopsided, and Chad took full advantage of the moment. "Guess we should have known better than to expect much from charity cases," he said loudly, earning chuckles from his friends. Trevor clenched his fist so tightly his knuckles turned white, while Marcus stared at the floor, his face flushed with shame. Neither of them said a word, but inside, frustration boiled over. Things only got worse after gym class. As the twins headed to the locker room to change, Chad and his gang cornered them near the lockers. Chad leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, his smirk widening as he studied them. "You two are pathetic," he declared. "No wonder no one talks to you. You're boring, weird, and, honestly, kind of creepy." Trevor couldn't hold back any longer. "We haven't done anything to you," he snapped, his voice trembling with anger. "Why can't you just leave us alone?" Chad raised an eyebrow, pretending to look surprised. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hurt your feelings? Maybe you should toughen up a bit, or maybe—" He paused dramatically, his grin turning malicious. "You're too scared to fight back?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He knew exactly what Chad was doing, trying to provoke them into reacting so he could justify whatever punishment came next. Fighting back would mean getting into trouble, possibly even losing their scholarships. But staying silent felt unbearable, too. It was like being trapped between a rock and a hard place with no way out. For days, the twins avoided Chad and his friends as much as possible. They stuck to quieter corners of the school, eating lunch in empty classrooms and taking long routes to avoid crossing paths with their tormentors. But avoiding Chad didn't stop the bullying. It just gave him more ammunition. Rumors began circulating around the school, whispers that Trevor and Marcus were cowards, too afraid to stand up for themselves. Some students believed the rumors. Others dismissed them as typical Chad drama. Either way, the twins found themselves increasingly isolated, unsure of whom to trust. Despite the growing tension, Trevor and Marcus refused to let Chad see how much his words affected them. At home, they poured their frustrations into training. Every evening, after finishing homework and chores, they retreated to their basement dojo. There, surrounded by the familiar smell of worn mats and old wood, they practiced tirelessly. Kicks became sharper, punches more precise, and form smoother. Each movement helped release the pent-up emotions they couldn't express elsewhere. Martial arts had always been their refuge, and now it was their lifeline. Their mother noticed the change in her sons almost immediately. Where once they bounced through the house with energy and laughter, they now moved quietly, shoulders slumped, and eyes distant. One night, after finding Marcus staring blankly at the ceiling instead of reading his book, she sat beside him and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Talk to me," she urged softly. "What's going on?" At first, Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to worry her, especially since she worked so hard to give them opportunities at St. Augustine's. But eventually, the words spilled out. All the teasing, the isolation, the feeling of being trapped. Trevor joined the conversation, adding his perspective. Together, they painted a picture of the hostile environment they faced daily. Ms. Johnson listened carefully, her heart breaking for her boys. When they finished speaking, she took a deep breath and said, I know it's hard, and I wish I could protect you from everything, but I can't. What I can do is remind you of who you are. You're strong, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. You've overcome challenges before, and you'll overcome this one too. Her words offered some comfort, but the reality remained daunting. How could they stand up to someone like Chad without risking everything they'd worked for? The question lingered heavily in their minds, unanswered but impossible to ignore. As weeks turned into months, the bullying continued unabated. Chad grew bolder, emboldened by the lack of resistance from his victims. One day during recess, he approached the twins as they sat under a tree, attempting to study for an upcoming test. "Hey, losers," he called out, drawing attention from nearby students. "Still hiding from everyone? No wonder you don't have any friends." This time, Marcus didn't lower his gaze. Instead, he looked directly at Chad, his expression calm but resolute. "We're not hiding," he replied evenly. "We're focusing on what matters." Chad blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected response. Then he laughed, though it sounded forced. "Yeah, sure, whatever helps you sleep at night." With that, he walked away, leaving the twins to their thoughts. That brief exchange marked a turning point for Marcus and Trevor. For the first time, they realized they didn't have to let Chad define them. They could choose how to respond, even if it meant enduring more pain in the short term. Slowly, a plan began forming in their minds, a way to reclaim their dignity without resorting to violence. But they knew it wouldn't be easy. Standing up to someone like Chad required courage, strategy, and faith in themselves. And though fear still lingered, it no longer controlled them. Unbeknownst to anyone at St. Augustine's, the quiet twin boys harbored secrets beneath their unassuming exteriors. Secrets that would soon come to light and change everything. Every evening after the chaos of school and the weight of Chad's bullying had settled into a dull ache, Trevor and Marcus returned to their sanctuary, the basement dojo. It was more than just a room with worn-out mats and faded posters of martial arts legends on the walls. It was a place where they felt safe, strong, and connected. The air smelled faintly of sweat and polish, a comforting reminder of all the hours they'd spent training there over the years. Here, they weren't scholarship kids or targets for ridicule. They were fighters, disciplined and skilled, carrying forward the legacy of their father. Their father had been their first teacher, patiently guiding them through basic stances and movements when they were barely old enough to tie their own belts. He taught them not only how to punch and kick, but also the deeper lessons behind martial arts: respect, patience, control, and humility. "A true martial artist doesn't fight to prove himself," he would say. "He fights to protect what matters." Those words stayed with Trevor and Marcus long after his passing, shaping the way they approached both their training and their lives. Now, in the quiet solitude of the basement, the twins practiced with renewed intensity. Each movement was deliberate, each breath steady. They worked together seamlessly, mirroring each other's forms as if they shared one mind. Their kicks sliced through the air with precision, their punches landed with power, and their blocks were impenetrable. To anyone watching, it would have been clear that these boys were no amateurs. They moved with the confidence and skill of seasoned practitioners. Yet, despite their abilities, they never spoke about their martial arts training outside the dojo. At St. Augustine's, they remained silent, keeping their talents hidden beneath layers of humility. The reasons for this secrecy were complex. For one, they didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to themselves. Being black belt fighters might earn them temporary admiration, but it could also make them bigger targets for jealousy or resentment. More importantly, though, they feared misusing their skills. Their father had drilled into them the importance of using martial arts responsibly, to defend, not to attack, to resolve conflicts peacefully whenever possible. Fighting at school, especially against someone like Chad, felt wrong somehow. It wasn't just about avoiding trouble, it was about honoring their father's teachings. But the bullying continued to weigh heavily on them. Every snide comment, every shove in the hallway, every mocking laugh chipped away at their patience. At night, lying awake in their shared bedroom, Trevor and Marcus often talked about what they should do. "We can't keep letting him walk all over us," Trevor said one evening, his voice tinged with frustration. "If we don't stand up to him, he'll never stop." "I know," Marcus replied quietly. "But fighting back isn't the answer. You heard Mom. Violence only leads to more violence. We need to find another way." Trevor sighed, staring at the ceiling. "What other way is there? Chad thrives on making people feel powerless. If we don't show him we're not afraid, he'll just keep pushing until we break." Marcus didn't respond right away. He understood his brother's anger. He felt it too, but something inside him resisted the idea of confronting Chad directly. Deep down, he believed there had to be a better solution, even if he couldn't see it yet. Instead of dwelling on the problem, he suggested they focus on their training. "Let's go practice," he said finally. "It'll help clear our heads." Down in the dojo, the twins threw themselves into their routines with fierce determination. They sparred lightly, testing each other's reflexes and strategies. When Trevor landed a particularly sharp kick, Marcus grinned. "Not bad," he admitted. "But you telegraphed your move. Try masking it next time." Trevor nodded, adjusting his stance. "Got it. Your turn. Show me something new." As they trained, their frustrations melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose. Martial arts gave them an outlet for their emotions, a way to channel their anger and fear into something productive. With every kick and punch, they reminded themselves of who they truly were. Not victims, but warriors. Warriors who chose peace over conflict, strength over aggression, and honor over pride. Meanwhile, their mother noticed the toll the bullying was taking on her sons. Though they tried to hide it, she could see the exhaustion in their eyes and the tension in their shoulders. One night after dinner, she called them into the living room for a family meeting. Sitting cross-legged on the couch, she looked at them with concern. "I know things are tough at school," she began gently. "And I'm so proud of how you've handled yourselves. But I also know you're struggling. So, let's talk about it." For a moment, neither boy spoke. Then Trevor hesitated, glancing at Marcus before addressing their mom. "It's Chad," he admitted. "He won't leave us alone. No matter what we do, he finds a way to make our lives miserable." Ms. Johnson nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I figured as much. What does he say to you?" Marcus shrugged, trying to downplay the situation. "Just stuff. Calling us names, saying we don't belong here. Nothing we haven't heard before." His mother raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't make it okay. Words can hurt just as much as actions. And nobody deserves to be treated that way." "We know," Trevor said quickly. "But what are we supposed to do? If we tell a teacher, it'll just make things worse. Chad will deny everything, and then he'll come after us even harder." Ms. Johnson sighed, recognizing the truth in her son's words. Schools like St. Augustine's often turned a blind eye to bullying, especially when it involved popular students like Chad. Still, she refused to let her boys face this alone. "Maybe telling a teacher isn't the best option right now," she conceded. "But you can't let him win either. You're stronger than he thinks. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Don't let his words define you." Her advice resonated with the twins, planting a seed of courage in their hearts. Over the next few days, they thought carefully about what she'd said. They realized that standing up to Chad didn't necessarily mean fighting him. It meant refusing to let his behavior diminish their self-worth. They decided to start small, finding subtle ways to assert themselves without escalating the situation. During lunch, when Chad mocked their food again, Trevor calmly replied, "At least we're eating something healthy. That deli sandwich probably costs more than it's worth." His tone was light, almost teasing, which caught Chad off guard. For once, the bully didn't have a comeback ready. In class, when Chad whispered insults under his breath, Marcus ignored him completely, focusing, instead on raising his hand to answer questions. His confidence surprised both his classmates and his teachers, earning him unexpected praise. Slowly but surely, The twins began reclaiming their space at St. Augustine's, proving to themselves, and to Chad, that they weren't as weak as he assumed. Yet, despite their progress, the tension between them and Chad remained unresolved. One afternoon during gym class, Chad took things a step further. As the twins stood awkwardly on the sidelines waiting for instructions, he sauntered over with a smirk. "You know," he said loudly, "you two act like you're too good to hang out with the rest of us. Maybe you think you're tough or something." Trevor clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. "We're not trying to act tough," he replied evenly. "We're just here to learn, same as everyone else." Chad laughed, clearly amused by the response. "Learn? Please. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real fight. Bet you don't. Even know how to throw a punch." The challenge hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Marcus felt his heart race, torn between indignation and caution. He knew Chad was baiting them, trying to provoke a reaction, but part of him wanted to prove him wrong, to show everyone that they weren't the pushovers he imagined. Before either twin could respond, the gym teacher blew his whistle, signaling the start of the activity. Chad walked away, still smirking, leaving the twins to stew in their thoughts. That night, as they practiced in the basement dojo, the conversation replayed in their minds. Chad's taunts echoed in the silence, mingling with the sound of their kicks and punches. "Do you think he knows?" Trevor asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. Marcus paused mid-form, lowering his leg slowly. "Knows what?" "That we're black belts." Trevor shook his head. "I doubt it. If he did, he wouldn't be so cocky." Marcus nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. "Still, maybe it's time we stopped hiding. Not because we want to fight him, but because we shouldn't have to hide who we are." Trevor considered this, his brow furrowing. "You're right. But showing him means risking everything. Are we ready for that?" They didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as they continued training, moving in perfect harmony, they felt a spark of resolve ignite within them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, as brothers, as fighters, and as champions of their own story. The tension between Trevor and Marcus and Chad had reached a boiling point. Every day felt like walking on thin ice, never knowing when the next insult or shove would come. The twins tried their best to stay composed, focusing on their studies, and avoiding unnecessary confrontations. But Chad was relentless, always finding new ways to push their buttons. It was as if he thrived on their discomfort, feeding off their silence like fuel for his ego. One chilly autumn afternoon, the breaking point finally arrived. Gym class had ended and the students were filing out of the locker room, chatting and laughing as they headed back to their next class. Trevor and Marcus lingered behind, taking their time to gather their things. They wanted to avoid the crowded hallways, hoping to slip away unnoticed. But fate had other plans. As they turned the corner into the main section of the locker room, they froze. Chad, Ethan, and Ryan stood blocking the exit, their arms crossed and smug grins plastered across their faces. There was no way around them. The twins exchanged a glance, silently communicating their unease. This wasn't just another casual run-in. It was an ambush. "Well, well," Chad drawled, stepping forward. His voice dripped with mockery. "Look who we have here. The charity cases decided to show up today." Trevor clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw tightening. He hated being called that name. It reminded him of all the times people dismissed them because of where they came from. But he forced himself to stay calm, remembering their promise not to let Chad provoke them. Beside him, Marcus took a deep breath, keeping his expression neutral. "What do you want, Chad?" Marcus asked evenly, his tone devoid of emotion. "We're just trying to get to class," Chad chuckled, clearly amused by the response. "Oh, I'm sure you are, but you know what? I don't think you belong here. Not really. Guys like you're used to scraping by, aren't you? Used to begging for scraps, so tell me, how does it feel to be surrounded by people who actually earned their spot?" His words stung, but the twins refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing their pain. Instead, they stood their ground, their eyes locked onto his. For a moment, the room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Chad moved closer, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his shirt and shoving him roughly against the lockers. The metallic clang echoed through the empty space, making Trevor's heart race. "What's wrong, little guy?" Chad sneered, leaning in close. "Too scared to fight back?" Marcus's breath hitched, panic rising in his chest. He could feel the cold metal pressing into his back, the weight of Chad's grip holding him in place. Memories flooded his mind. Memories of his father teaching him how to stand tall, how to defend himself without losing control. But this wasn't the dojo. This was real life, and the stakes were higher than ever. Beside him, Trevor stepped forward, his hands balled into fists. "Let him go, Chad," he demanded, his voice firm despite the fear bubbling inside him. "This isn't funny anymore." Chad glanced over his shoulder, rolling his eyes. "Relax, will you? We're just having a little fun." Then turning back to Marcus, he added, "Come on, tough guy. Show me what you've got. Or are you all talk?" Something snapped inside Marcus. It wasn't just the bullying or the insults. It was the years of feeling powerless, of being told he didn't belong, of watching Chad strut around like he owned the world while others suffered in silence. Without thinking, Marcus twisted his body sharply, slipping out of Chad's grasp. Before anyone could react, he pivoted on one foot and delivered a swift, roundhouse kick straight to Chad's chest. The impact sent Chad stumbling backward, his eyes wide with shock. He crashed into the row of lockers behind him, the loud bang reverberating through the room. Ethan and Ryan stood frozen, staring at Marcus as if they'd never seen him before. Even Trevor gaped, momentarily speechless. For a few seconds, no one moved. The air was heavy with disbelief. Then slowly, Chad pushed himself upright, rubbing his chest where Marcus's foot had connected. His face was red, not just from embarrassment but from anger. You actually hit me," he stammered, his voice trembling with rage. Marcus didn't respond. His chest rose and fell rapidly, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He hadn't planned to fight back. He hadn't even realized what he was doing until it was over. Now, standing there in the aftermath, he felt a mix of emotions: relief, guilt, and a strange sense of empowerment. But above all, he felt exposed. Everyone in the room now knew the truth. He wasn't just some quiet scholarship kid. He was a fighter. "Come on," Trevor whispered urgently, grabbing Marcus's arm. "We need to go, now." Snapping out of his daze, Marcus nodded. Together, the twins bolted out of the locker room, leaving Chad and his friends behind. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway as they raced toward the safety of an empty classroom. Once inside, they closed the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. "What just happened?" Trevor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shook his head, still processing everything. "I don't know. I couldn't take it anymore." Trevor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Well, one thing's for sure. We're in trouble now." Word of the incident spread quickly. By the end of the school day, everyone at St. Augustine's Academy seemed to know about the confrontation in the locker room. Whispers followed the twins wherever they went, some filled with admiration, others laced with suspicion. Students who had once ignored them now approached them cautiously, asking questions about martial arts and whether they were really black belts. Even teachers looked at them differently, unsure of how to handle the sudden shift in dynamics. Chad, meanwhile, was furious. Humiliated in front of his friends and peers, he vowed revenge. He couldn't let someone like Marcus, a scholarship kid no less, get the better of him. Determined to reclaim his dominance, he began plotting his next move. A week later, during assembly, the principal announced the annual martial arts exhibition, an event designed to showcase the talents of students involved in various combat disciplines. The exhibition was a highlight of the school year, attended by parents, faculty, and alumni. It was also highly competitive, with participants judged not only on skill but also on sportsmanship and technique. To everyone's surprise, Chad volunteered to participate and publicly challenged Marcus to a formal sparring match. Standing at the podium, he smirked as he addressed the crowd. "Let's settle this once and for all," he declared. "If Marcus thinks he's so tough, let's see him prove it in front of everyone." The room erupted into murmurs, students craning, their necks to get a better look at Marcus. Some cheered encouragingly, eager to see the mysterious twin in action again. Others whispered nervously, wondering if the fight would escalate further. All eyes were on Marcus as he rose from his seat, his expression unreadable. He hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. Accepting the challenge meant putting himself in the spotlight, risking judgment and scrutiny. Declining, however, would make him appear weak and give Chad the upper hand. After a long pause, Marcus nodded. "Fine," he said quietly, though his voice carried enough authority to silence the room. "I'll fight you." The announcement sent waves of excitement through the school. Posters advertising the upcoming exhibition appeared on bulletin boards, featuring bold headlines like "The Ultimate Showdown" and "Who Will Prevail?" Rumors swirled about the twins' training regimen, with some students speculating that they practiced late into the night. Others claimed they saw Trevor and Marcus sparring in the park, moving with such speed and precision that it looked almost supernatural. Despite the growing hype, the twins remained focused. Every evening, they trained harder than ever, refining their techniques and strategizing for the match. Trevor became Marcus's shadow, helping him analyze Chad's strengths and weaknesses. "He relies too much on brute force," Trevor observed one night as they reviewed videos of past matches. "If you can dodge his attacks and counter quickly, he'll win." Marcus nodded, absorbing the advice. "And if he tries to intimidate me, stay calm," Trevor replied firmly. "Remember Dad's lessons. Focus on your breathing and trust your instincts." Their mother noticed the intensity of their preparations and pulled them aside one evening. "Are you sure about this?" she asked gently. "Fighting Chad might solve one problem, but it could create others." "We know, Mom," Marcus said, meeting her gaze, "but we can't keep running from this. If we don't stand up to him now, he'll never stop." Ms. Johnson studied her sons for a moment, pride mingling with concern in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Then train hard, boys. And remember, strength isn't just about winning. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." With those words echoing in their minds, Trevor and Marcus threw themselves into their final preparations. They visualized every possible scenario, rehearsed countless combinations, and meditated to clear their thoughts. On the morning of the YM exhibition, they woke early, ate a light breakfast, and dressed in their pristine white uniforms, the same ones their father had worn during his competitions. As they walked onto the gymnasium floor, the roar of the crowd washed over them. Parents filled the bleachers, cameras flashing as they captured every moment. Teachers sat along the sidelines, notebooks in hand to evaluate performances. And somewhere in the sea of faces, Chad stood waiting, his confident smirk masking the nerves beneath. The referee signaled for the match to begin. The aftermath of the martial arts exhibition rippled through St. Augustine's Academy like a storm, leaving its mark on everyone. For Trevor and Marcus, the days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions: pride, relief, uncertainty, and even a hint of fear. They had stood up to Chad not just in words but in action, proving themselves as more than just quiet scholarship kids. But with victory came attention, and attention was something they had always tried to avoid. At first, the reaction from their classmates was overwhelming. Students who had once ignored them or whispered behind their backs now approached them, eagerly, bombarding them with questions about their training, their techniques, and how they managed to stay so calm under pressure. Some admired their skills, others seemed almost intimidated, unsure of how to interact with the twins now that they knew what they were capable of. Even teachers began treating them differently, calling on them more often in class discussions or assigning leadership roles in group projects. It was as if the entire school saw them through new eyes. But not everyone reacted positively. Chad, for one, struggled to come to terms with his defeat. The same boy who had strutted through the halls like he owned the place now walked with his head down, avoiding eye contact whenever possible. His friends, Ethan and Ryan, kept close to him, muttering defensively whenever anyone mentioned the match. It was just luck, Ethan insisted during lunch one day when someone brought it up. Marcus got lucky, that's all. Chad didn't say much. He didn't need to. His clenched fists and scowling expression spoke volumes. Inside, he seethed with anger and humiliation. Losing to Marcus wasn't just embarrassing. It felt like a personal attack on everything he believed about himself. He had always been the strongest, the fastest, the best, at least in his own mind. Now that image was shattered, replaced by the memory of being knocked off his feet in front of hundreds of people. For weeks, Chad avoided Trevor and Marcus altogether, keeping his distance while plotting his next move. Yet deep down, a part of him couldn't help but feel curious. How did they learn to fight like that? Where did they train? What else could they do? These questions gnawed at him, mixing with his resentment until he couldn't ignore them anymore. One afternoon after school let out, Chad found himself lingering near the twins' lockers. He watched silently as they gathered their books, chatting quietly with each other. Finally, taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Hey," he said, gruffly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Trevor and Marcus turned to face him, their expressions guarded. "What do you want, Chad?" Marcus asked cautiously. Chad hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Then, swallowing his pride, he blurted out, "I want to know how you did it. How you learned to fight like that." The twins exchanged a glance, surprised by the question. After a moment, Marcus replied, "We've been training since we were kids. Our dad taught us." "Your dad?" Chad echoed, raising an eyebrow. "So, you're really black belts?" "Yes," Trevor answered firmly. "Does that surprise you?" Chad looked away, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "Kind of. I mean, you never said anything before." "That's because we didn't think it mattered," Marcus explained. "Martial arts isn't about showing off, it's about discipline, respect, and protecting what's important." Chad nodded slowly, absorbing the words. For the first time, he realized there was more to Trevor and Marcus than he had assumed. Maybe they weren't just charity cases trying to scrape by. Maybe they were stronger than he'd given them credit for, not just physically, but mentally, and emotionally too. After a long pause, Chad muttered, "Look, I'm sorry about everything. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did." His apology caught the twins off guard. They hadn't expected Chad to admit fault, let alone apologize. Still, they could see the sincerity in his eyes. Tentatively, Marcus extended his hand. "Apology accepted," he said simply. Chad shook his hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thanks. And maybe you could teach me some stuff you know about martial arts?" Trevor chuckled softly. "You sure you can handle it?" "I'll try," Chad replied, his tone lighter than usual. "Just don't go easy on me." From that day on, something shifted between Chad and the twins. Though their relationship remained cautious at first, it gradually grew into mutual respect. Chad started joining them during breaks, asking questions about their training and sharing stories about his own experiences. In return, Trevor and Marcus offered advice, teaching him basic stances and techniques. Their sessions became a regular occurrence, drawing curious stares from other students who never imagined seeing Chad working alongside the very boys he used to bully. As word spread about their unlikely friendship, the culture of St. Augustine's began to change. Bullying incidents decreased and students started looking at each other differently, not as rivals or outsiders, but as peers with unique strengths and talents. Teachers noticed the shift too, praising Trevor and Marcus for their role in fostering unity. "You two are setting an example for everyone here," one teacher remarked during homeroom. "Keep it up." Encouraged by the positive response, the twins decided to take things a step further. Inspired by their basement dojo and the lessons their father had instilled in them, they proposed starting a martial arts club at school. First, the administration was hesitant, worried about liability issues and potential conflicts. But Trevor and Marcus persisted, presenting a detailed plan that emphasized safety, inclusivity, and character development. Eventually, the principal agreed to give it a trial run. The announcement of the new club sparked excitement across campus. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards, inviting students of all skill levels to join. "No experience necessary," the posters read. "Learn self-defense, build confidence, and make new friends." On the first day of practice, the gymnasium buzzed with anticipation. Dozens of students showed up, ranging from eager beginners to seasoned athletes. Trevor and Marcus stood at the front, wearing crisp white uniforms and exuding calm authority. As they led warm-ups and introduced basic techniques, their passion for martial arts shone through, inspiring those around them. Watching from the sidelines, Chad couldn't help but smile. He had come a long way since the exhibition match, learning not only how to throw a proper punch, but also how to treat others with kindness and respect. "You guys are amazing," he told Trevor and Marcus afterward, genuinely impressed. "I don't know how you do it." "It's not just us," Marcus replied modestly. "Everyone here has the potential to be great. We're just helping them see it." Over time, the martial arts club became more than just a place to train. It became a community. Students bonded over shared goals and challenges, forming friendships that transcended cliques and stereotypes. Even Chad, once the king of arrogance, emerged as a supportive mentor, encouraging newcomers and cheering on his teammates during sparring matches. Through it all, Trevor and Marcus remained humble, focusing on the values their father had taught them: respect, perseverance, and compassion. They knew they couldn't change the world overnight, but they could make a difference. One person, one lesson, one kick at a time. And as they stood side by side, watching their fellow students grow stronger and more confident, they felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had faced adversity head-on, refusing to let fear or intimidation define them. In doing so, they had not only transformed their own lives, but also inspired others to believe in themselves. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them together.